Hi, I'm Amy Duckworth from Empower Admissions Consulting, and welcome to Inside Admissions. Today I'm joined by Andrew Mellor from Copenhagen Business School. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, Amy.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Please could you start off by telling us what is your role at Copenhagen Business School and how long have you been there?
Sure, I work on the Full-Time MBA team. I'm one of the admissions managers here. I've been here for 4 years. I started on the executive MBA and now focus mainly on the full-time MBA.
Okay, brilliant. Full-Time MBA is the program that we're going to be talking about today.
Yes.
Excellent. So we're going to start off with some rapid fire questions. Then we're going to do a deep dive and focus on one particular aspect of the admissions process. And we're going to finish off with some myth busting. Is that okay?
Perfect.
Okay, rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. What is the length of your program?
We're a 12-month program.
And your average cohort size?
Around 45.
Okay. Number of years work experience required?
Minimum 3 years work experience post-bachelor's.
Okay. Percentage of international candidates in the cohort?
I mean, it varies year on year, but around 90%, 80, 90%.
Right, okay. And the age of the oldest and the youngest person in your most recent cohort?
Yeah, we don't actually take age into account, obviously, on the admission side of things, but I'd say youngest probably 25, oldest I think is maybe 41 this year. Average age is 41 and average age was 31, but it's very broad in the class.
Mm-hmm. And what's the average GMAT or GRE if you require the test?
We do. Average classic GMAT for the most recent intake was 660. GMAT Focus, which is the newly introduced test, it was 580. Mm-hmm. And GRE was, I think, 309.
Okay. And what about the interview part of the admissions process? Do you require a personal or a video interview?
Yes, everybody needs to, subject to assessment. If you pass your application stage, you can either do an in-person interview with us or you can do an online interview with us, but everybody needs to do an interview.
Okay. And what's the question that you get asked the most either at the interview or during the admissions process?
Obviously, everybody wants more information on careers. We can talk about how lovely Copenhagen is, but you do an MBA to accelerate your career. So typically they have some follow-up questions about their post-MBA plans and careers. They also hear that I'm a person that's moved to Copenhagen. So quite often they actually have personal questions as well about what it's been like to move to Copenhagen, learning the local language and how necessary it is to learn Danish here, which for our students, not really. It tends to be business language is English here. So I would say those 2 or 3 questions in an interview itself.
Okay, last 2 rapid fire questions. Who is the chair of your admissions committee?
Sure, so the admissions team itself chairs the admissions committee, but it includes, it's quite Scandinavian, very sort of inclusive here. We actually include the careers team, the program directors as well, to get a full opinion on the applications and interviews that we receive. But it is the final decision, or rather the chair of the ADCOM is the admissions team itself.
Right, okay. And last question, can you tell me a particularly famous or successful alum of your program?
Yeah, we don't tend to focus on individuals here, so it tends to be in terms of where people are asking us about or famous alumni. In a way, it's more focused on career destinations, so we often get asked about the companies involved. So depending on the sector, the big sectors here, so life sciences is probably Novo Nordisk, is the biggest. In terms of financial services, Danske Bank, and energy and sustainability is big here, so Vestas and Ørsted are really big too. So it tends to be companies like that people are focused on rather than individuals.
Right. Okay, so for our deep dive topic, I'd like to talk about how you assess whether somebody is a good fit for your program and for your school. So I know that CBS has a focus on sustainability and on responsible leadership, and that you also incorporate a very Scandinavian perspective on management in your program. So when it comes to admissions, how do you assess whether somebody is a good fit for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's the fundamental aspect of looking at somebody's fit for a program. So probably quite common across business schools, but in particular, we're looking at what you've done previously, so your academic background and your career progression, why specifically you want to come to our MBA, and what you want to do afterwards, so your post-MBA goals and maybe the next 3 to 5 years. And essentially what we're looking for in your answers and questions there is specificity and depth. So we can sort of see beyond the surface. And you're totally right in terms of the mindset of people coming into the program. It does tend to be people interested in this sustainability and responsible leadership angle. And of course, they're taking an MBA that they're business orientated and they're ambitious, but they do tend to have this interest in that angle. The second aspect is kind of like this or rather Scandinavian approach to leadership and management. People are interested in that, and I think it ties quite well into the Nordic 9 competencies that we're trying to develop in the students here at CBS, and you can read much more about them too, but it does tend to resonate with people, and I think it's actually quite a good representation of the characteristics that we're looking for too. So I'd probably encourage students to look into those couple of aspects or talk to us about them, and we can sort of find that alignment with you before you apply.
And how common is it for people to stay in Denmark after their program?
Yeah, it's very common, around 70% of our students. It depends on the year, of course. Yeah, it is, particularly from our time in London, people would come, study and then go back. But here it tends to be maybe around 70%, 3/4, as I say. And that's part of why they're coming. They want to experience that opportunity to work here in Scandinavia and really get that as perspective on this quite flat hierarchy we have here and how we approach things here. There's also a practical element of that. There's now an automatic 3-year post-study work visa if you complete the program.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the best in Europe actually now, looking at where the other directions are going with other countries. You're allowed to bring your family and dependents as well, and they're on the same terms as you. So there's a practical element here as well as the non-practical.
Yeah. And any advice for candidates who are trying to work out whether CBS is the right fit for them? How can they, what steps could they take to try and work that out?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, the starting point would probably be reading some of our literature and online materials. But you can take that a step further. We're a small program, so we're very happy to speak to people one-to-one. And in fact, we strongly encourage it. So we're very available to do that. I always say to students, there's no such thing as too small a question when it comes to an MBA. It's such a big investment. And then the second aspect as well is very much, and we actively encourage students to do this, it's part of our application form now, that we want you to have spoken to a current student or alumni before signing up for the program. And that's on 2 levels, really. We want you to have the very clear expectations and know what the type of environment you're coming into. And secondly, that can be super useful to give you that direct context of somebody who's been there and done it. It seems like an obvious thing to do, but you'd be surprised the amount of people who haven't done that. Our community is really approachable. I think that's something I've really noticed here. So we can help facilitate that for people who are a bit further along. I always say that to people, if they can do that when they have a bit more questions prepared, that's that next stage, I would say, is speaking to an alum or a current student.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, and I think that speaking with current students and alumni just can give such an insight into the student perspective and what the program is actually like for somebody who's done it and lived it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also sometimes we sort of informally get them, involved in the admissions process. Sometimes they make recommendations, or if we're talking to people, we also ask students for references as well. So we check that too. But it's more for aligning expectations and helping them understand that what they're going to be signing up for. Because an MBA in Europe and an MBA specifically in Scandinavia is different from, let's say, a North American context or an Indian context, for example. So it's to try and help them understand that too.
Yeah, part of doing their research. Yeah,
absolutely.
So we're going to finish off with some myth busting. I've got 3 statements about MBA admissions, and I'd like to get a yay or a nay from you. Is that okay?
Of course, let's do it.
Perfect. So number 1, you need your letter of recommendation to be from a VIP, your company, very senior person.
No, I always talk to students about this when they ask about references. It's actually, I boil it very simply down to who is somebody that can talk strongly or in depth about your strengths and weaknesses. Okay, there's more to it than that, but it's actually not even a letter you need. It's a form that goes out from our application form, maybe take them 20, 30 minutes. But it doesn't necessarily need to be somebody super senior. In fact, you'd be better off having somebody who's worked with you a lot, and sometimes in different contexts. That might necessarily be super VIP level, if that's the way to put it. But
yeah. That makes sense. Makes sense. Number 2, your GMAT score is the most important part of your MBA application.
Definitely not. I would actually say GMAT score is helpful, and it's more to ensure minimum standards because an MBA is challenging. We need to make sure you can do the quantitative, the verbal aspect. It does track to achievement on the program, but it's more or rather academic aspects of the program, but it's not the be all and end all. Very much a holistic consideration of your overall strength of your application, but you can't do it without it. So it's more, like I say, to minimum standards, and we definitely see that track if with somebody, if they're struggling on a GMAT, then they probably would then struggle on the program. So we're pretty strict on having that minimum standard at least.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And finally, you have to speak to current students before applying.
We don't have to, but we strongly encourage it. It's really, we actually even added it as part of our application form maybe 2 years ago now to say, to double check that people have spoken to a current student or alumni. Of course, we can't force you to do that, and we can help you with that. But it's, I strongly encourage it, even if it's something that hasn't really come across your radar until application stage. We'll maybe then at perhaps offer stage say to you, make sure you go and speak to, we'll maybe even make some recommendations of people for you to speak to. I think it's an absolute no-brainer to go and do it.
Okay, that sounds like a yay.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So thank you so much for joining me today, Andrew. It's been a pleasure talking with you. If you want to know more about the Copenhagen Business School MBA, there are lots of videos on MBA Tube. You can find out about the faculty, the program, the careers offering. So I definitely encourage you to go and have a look at those. And for guidance on all things admissions, you can follow Empower Admissions Consulting, or you can reach out to us for one-to-one guidance on your MBA applications. And that's all for today. Thank you.
Thank you.